Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Shabbos Daf Kuf Chaf Vav, or Daf Kuf Chaf Hey Amud Beis. 2 lines from the bottom. We had a discussion now, Mishnah, regarding a pekak hachaloin, a window shutter, window pane, which they would remove from the window. I said I was speaking about actually a skylight, so it's a window up in the ceiling. And the question was, can one return that shutter, that pane, that plug, and close up the window on Shabbos itself? Rabbi Lezer says there are 2 preconditions to allow that. Number 1, kosher, needs to be tied. The pekak, the shutter, needs to have been tied to the building, to the window. Number 2, it needs to be tali. It needs to be suspended, hanging, can't be dragging, sitting on the floor. So it needs to be inherently connected, and it needs to be visibly connected. It needs to be hanging. So these two conditions are required to allow using, returning the shutter back into its place. In that case, it doesn't look like he's building anything. He's merely putting back the shutter, which belongs there. So it doesn't look like he's adding anything, like he's building anything. That is Rabbi Lezer. The Chachamim say, "Benkach or benkach poking geboy." Either in this case or in that case, you can use this shutter. You can replace. You can put it back into the window. Now, what does benkach or benkach mean? Are they coming to negate both conditions of Rabbi Lezer? They don't require not tied nor suspended, or perhaps they do require something. So I have a machlokes. Says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom on Kuf Chaf Hey Amud Beis. Either way, you can use it. My benkach or benkach. What does it mean either way? Omar Abba Abba, Omar Rav Kahana. Ben kosher, ben she'eni kosher. Whether it's tied or untied, you can use this. There are no preconditions here, according to Rabbanan. It doesn't look like he's building anything. This is a shutter, a plug, which is meant to go back into its place. Everybody knows it's not building anything. It's fine. V'husha masukin, provided that it's designated for it. It's actually said it's muchan me'esmo lekach. It's prepared from yesterday for this. It's destined to be used for this purpose. All know that this is merely a window shutter. It's not a binyan. He's not building anything. He's not constructing anything. So nothing is required. It could be somebody sitting on the floor, not tied nor suspended, and it's mutter. We regard it as a kli, as a utensil, which is meant to go back into its place. So this is the shita of Rav Abba, who was very lenient. He says, according to the Chachamim, we don't need anything. Benkach or benkach, whether it's tied and suspended, or whether it doesn't have anything. Actually, it says benkach or benkach means bein if it's kosher, whether it's tied, whether it's not even tied. Nothing. Then it is mutter because it's prepared for it. It's mesuk and it's muchan. It's like a kli. Only Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Rabbi Yirmiyah challenged Rabbi Abba. He says, how could you be so lenient? V'lei mamar. Shouldn't you say better as follows? That benkach or benkach means certainly tied, it needs to be tied. Even according to Chachamim, kosher is a requirement. What then does benkach or benkach mean? It means like this: bein tali, bein she'eni tali. Whether it's suspended or whether it's not suspended, v'husha kosher, provided that it's tied. So perhaps tying is a requirement upon all. Rabbi Lezer and Chachamim require that because it needs to look like it's built in, like it's attached to the building, like he's not introducing new material here. So Rabbi Lezer and the Chachamim both agree that Shiur is a requirement. The Chachamim are lenient in this regard. They don't require it to be suspended as well. It doesn't have to be visibly part of the system here. It can be sitting on the floor. As long as it's tied, that's enough. So how do you know that according to Chachamim, Shiur is not required? And he continued to say, the Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Amar Rav Yochanan. I have a right to this pshat. Because Rabba Bar Chana said the name of Yochanan, Machlekes kan. Same type of machlekes that we have here is actually a parallel machlekes elsewhere. Kach machlekes b'neger hanigra. The same machlekes is parallel elsewhere. It's mirrored. In the case of neger hanigra, this is a bolt, a door bolt, which they would insert into the threshold to keep the door closed. So this neger hanigra means it's dragging on the floor. There's a Mishnah that discusses it, and it seems from that Mishnah that that the Chachamim indeed require kshira. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi up on the top, on the first line, bein kosher. So this is Rabbi Abba, the first shita, saying that according to the Chachamim, benkach or benkach means bein if it's kosher, bein if it's not kosher. Says Rashi, koloimar means to say afilu kshir lo tzorich. even Shiur is not required. Vushim Mesukan, provided that it's prepared Muchan Me'as Malkach, that it's been prepared, it's been designated from yesterday, from before Shabbos, for this function. So this is Rav Abba's sheet. Why is it so simple to you? Why? How do you know that the Chacham are so lenient in this matter? Leima Mar, shouldn't you rather say T'loi Pligi Rabbanon Ela Tluya? That the Chacham are only disputing the suspension, the condition of Tluya. Rav Lezer boy kosher v'toloi. Rav Lezer requires not only tied but also that it's hanging, it's suspended. V'afilu kosher, even if it's tied, that's not enough. Im roisha nigar la'aretz. If it's dragging, if it's the top, the roisha means the bottom portion is sitting on the floor. Even if it's hanging, as long as it's nigar ba'aretz, it can't be used. So even in that case, chashiv le'Rav Lezer k'shomtim min akarku bonim b'lechatchila. Even if it's tied, but if it's dragging, Rabbi Lezer says you cannot use it because Rabbi Lezer considers this as though he's shomtim in akarka, as though he's picking it off the ground. He's initiating a construction project because it's not visibly a part and parcel of that window. For Rabbanan respond and say, no, we don't need that much. Bein toloi, bein nigrar, whether it's suspended, whether it's dragging, one can use this. Ubavatshi kosher, provided that it's tied. So as long as it's tied, it's already built into the system. One can take it and place it back into the window. Suspension, visibly connected, that's not required. So this perhaps is Rabbanan's response to Rabbi Lezer. Tying, yes. Suspension, no. The Amar Rabba Rabachana b'tzliya the pligi v'loy b'kshira. That the Machlekes is actually regarding tzliya. There's no discussion regarding Shira. Everybody requires it to be tied. The Madami lo plukta the Negah because Rabbi Bachana is Madami compares these two discussions. He compares this Machlekes by Pekak to the Machlekes of Negah Hanigrar V'Hasa, and over there we find L'divrei HaKoil Kosher B'inan. All agree that kosher, the tying is a precondition. Let's see the Machlekes by Negah Hanigrar. The Snan, back to the Gemara. On the fifth line, the Snan is related to the Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Erevin, which says Neger HaNigrar. Neger is this bolt, HaNigrar, which is dragging it down on the floor. Noyelam boy b'migdash of Levi Medina. One can use it, can lock the door with this bolt in the Beis HaMikdash, but not b'Medina in the provinces, meaning outside the Beis HaMikdash. We know that the Chachamim, they suspended their gzeros, their shvus. In the Beis HaMikdash, there's a term called Ein Shvus B'Mikdash. So the Yisur D'Rabbanan regarding Shabbos do not apply to the Beis HaMikdash in a case where it's tzarech avoda, for the need of the avoda. So the Chachamim suspended their Isser. They allowed this neger, even though it's dragging on the floor, which entails the Isser D'Rabbanan, they allowed it to be used in the Beis HaMikdash. One can insert it into the threshold, but not b'Medina, not outside the Beis HaMikdash. V'hamunach. But if it's actually sitting on the floor, meaning it's not even tied, kan v'kan asur, whether in the Beis HaMikdash or whether out of the Beis HaMikdash, it's asur. So according to the Tanakama, there are two conditions to allow that are required to allow this this neger to be used outside the Beis HaMikdash. There are two tanoim. There are two aspects, two details that need to be conformed over here. It needs to be something which is hanging. And number two, it needs to be tied. Number two, it needs to be something hanging. So there are two aspects here. It needs to be actually inherently built in. That's what the Shiur does. It's tied to the door or to the building here. This makes it like it's part and parcel of the pre-existing building. He's not actually constructing anything. Number two, it needs to be suspended. It needs to be visibly prepared, and it needs to be obvious that it stands to be used as a bolt for this doorway. So again, this neger is nigrar, so it's tied, but it's nigrar dragging on the floor below. So both conditions were not met. It's only tied but not suspended. So in that case, it's only asam d'Rabbanan. Why? Because the fact that it's tied, that removes the issa d'oraisa. It's no longer considered to be building min ha-Torah because it's tied to that building, to that doorway. It's already pre-connected. You're not introducing anything new. So min ha-Torah, there's no malacha here. The Chacham required that it be obvious, it be visible. You need to demonstrate that it's part and parcel of that system. It needs to be suspended, hanging midair. So if it's nigra, if it's dragging on the floor, that entails the issa midrabanan. Now, since it's in the Beis HaMikdash, one can use it because there's no issa midrabanan, there's no shvus in the Beis HaMikdash. Avaloi b'Medina, you cannot use it after the Beis HaMikdash because, although there's no issa midrabanan because it's tied, it's kosher, but since it's not totally, it's not suspended, it's not obvious, it's not visible that it is standing to be used as the bolt for this door, therefore it's issa midrabanan, looks like boina, and you cannot use it after the Beis HaMikdash. V'hamunach, but if it's simply sitting there lying on the floor, it's not suspended, nor is it even tied. In this case, it involves the issa min ha'torah of binyan, kan v'kan osur, in both locales, in the Beis HaMikdash or outside of it, you cannot use it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he goes a step lower. He says, we don't need to be so stringent. Rabbi Yehuda maintains that even a neger, which is not even tied to the door or to the wall, will not involve the issa min ha'torah. There's no binyan min ha'torah. This is a bolt, a door bolt, which is meant to go in and out. It's not, you're not building anything, it's not construction material. Therefore, min ha'torah, there's no binyan here. It's only a midrabanan. And the Chachamim required that it be tied, and that's sufficient. So midrabanan, you need to tie it, and you can't use it outside the Beis HaMikdash if it's not tied. In the Beis HaMikdash, you could use it regardless, because the fact that it's not tied only entails Issa D'Rabbanan, and that doesn't apply in the Beis HaMikdash. So Rabbi Yehuda downgrades. He goes a step lower. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hamunach b'Mikdash, a neger which is merely sitting on the floor, not even tied, can be used in the Beis HaMikdash because it only entails Issa D'Rabbanan. V'Hanigra b'Medina, this neger, this bolt which is tied, but it's not suspended, it's nigra, it's dragging on the floor. In this case, it's not even Asa Midrabanan because it's tied. The tying removes the rabbinic concern. V'anigra b'Medina. Explains the Gemara, V'tani we learned in the Brayso, Ezu neger ha'nigrar shenoil b'Mikdash, avaloi b'Medina. What is the example of a neger hanigrar, this bolt which is dragging, which can be used in the Beis HaMikdash and not outside of it? Kol she'kosher v'toli, v'rosh ha'migil ha'aretz. A neger, a bolt which is tied, so that removes the issa min ha'torah of binyan, and it's totally, it's hanging, but it's dragging down. V'rosh ha'migil ha'aretz, it reaches the floor, so it's sitting on the floor. At least the one side of it is on the floor. So it's not suspended, it's sitting on the floor. In this case, certainly there's no issa min ha'torah because it's tied, but there's issa d'Rabbanan because it's not so obvious and it's not visible enough that it's a utensil. Therefore, it looks like he's going to be building with it when he puts it into the threshold. And therefore, it's asa min d'Rabbanan, and it cannot be used in the Medina, but in the Mikdash it can be used. So this is the Shita, the Tanna Kama. Once again, two requirements need to be met in order to allow its use outside the Beis HaMikdash. Number one, tie to remove the issa min ha'torah of binyan. You need to have it attached to the building, to the structure. And since it's built in, it removes the issa binyan because you're not introducing any new material here. So min ha'torah is taken care of. Midrabanan, they require it to be suspended as well. It should be visible. It should be nikar that it is a utensil being used for this purpose. You can't have it drag on the floor. So there are two conditions, and the Beis HaMikdash, as long as the tying is there, which removes the Iraisa, we're not concerned about the Rabbanan. In Medina, outside the Beis HaMikdash, both requirements need to be met. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he goes a step lower. He says there's no issa min ha'torah involved at all. The only concern is the Rabbanan, and as long as it's tied, that addresses the rabbinic concern as well. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Zeh, this one which is tied and merely dragging on the floor, af Medina mutar. Even outside Beis HaMikdash is mutar because the whole concern is merely Rabbanan. It looks like binyan. Once it's tied, that removes that concern. So even if it's dragging on the floor, it's okay. Ella rather ezo Medina asur. What is the example of the neger which cannot be used by Medina? Kol she'enoi loy kasher v'loy toloi. The neger which is not tied nor suspended. V'shaimto manichem keren zavis. So when he removes it out of the hole, he puts it in the corner, meaning it's not tied, it's not suspended. In this case, Midrabanan looks like he's building when he puts it back into the hole. Looks like he's adding something. So, Midrabanan, one shouldn't use this outside the Beis HaMikdash. Now, this was the discussion about the bolt. Now, how does that pertain to the Pekaka Chaloi? The Gemara compared the two things. V'amar Rabbi Shua bar Abba mishmei de'ula. He said as follows: Man Tana Nagar Nigar. Who is the Tana there? The Tanakama of that Mishnah of Nagar Nigar, who says two requirements need to be met. There are two preconditions to allow the use of this bolt on Shabbos. It's Rebbe Lezer here. Who is it? It's Rebbe Lezer, who requires two things. Number one, kosher. It needs to be inherently connected. It needs to be tied to the building, tied to the door, tied to the window. In which case, it's pre-built. It's already built in. And that removes the concern of binyan. Number two, it needs to be suspended. It needs to be visible. It needs to be obviously standing to be used for that purpose. Designated for that shimush. So that's Rebbe Lezer. So we see that Rebbe Lezer, in the case of Nega HaNigra, requires two things. The Kshira removes the Deraisa concern. The Tzliya removes the Rabbinic concern. Likewise, when it comes to Pkaka Chaloin, it appears that over here we're speaking about totally Midrabanan. But two conditions need to be met to allow the use of this Pkak. Number one, it needs to be tied to the building. It needs to be connected to the building. In this case, you're not introducing new material here. And therefore it removes that really that real concern, the major concern of something which looks like he's constructing, like he's building. Number two, it needs to be actually suspended. It needs to be hanging mid-air. It can be dragging on the floor. So those two conditions need to be met prior to allowing the use of this pkak. Prior to allowing the use, to allow the returning the pkak to the chaloin. Now, let's just finish the calculation here. If the Tanakama of Nega HaNigra, who has those two conditions, is Rebbe Lezer, then apparently Rabbi Yehuda, who says, well, you don't need two things. Tying is what determines. As long as it's kosher, it's built into the system, built into the wall, etc., that removes any concern. That removes even the rabbinic concern. So apparently Rabbi Yehuda, who's he following? He's following the Shittas Rabbanon. We seem to only have two Shittas in this whole matter. So if the Tanakama requires two things, as Rebbe Lezer, Rabbi Yehuda says, well, Kshir is sufficient, is apparently compatible with Shittas Rabbanon. So what do we see from here? That even the Rabbanon who are mekel, who are lenient, require Kshira. They don't allow the pkak to be used under any circumstance, even if it's not tied. They require Kshira. They don't require suspension, tzliya. But Kshira is required. It needs to at least be connected to that wall, connected to that window to allow its use. Otherwise it appears like he's adding new material, like he's building something. So this is all Rabbi Yirmiyah challenging Rabba. How could you say that according to Rabbanan, nothing is required? I have a right from here that according to Rabbanan, Kshira is required. Amar Leiser, Rabba responded, Ano da Amr ki Tana. I have stated my statement in accordance with the following Tana, who says, who's very lenient. Even Kshira is not required. As long as the item, the object was prepared for this purpose, designated for this purpose, mentally prepared for this purpose. It's regarded as a kli, as a utensil. A kli is not building material. It's not construction material. Since when do you build with kalim? So the shutter, which was prepared for this purpose from before Shabbos. Likewise, the negar, this bolt, the fact that it's prepared before Shabbos to be used for this purpose, it's a kli, it's a utensil. Therefore, one may use it freely, unrestricted on Shabbos, without any concerns. Even if it's not tied, certainly not suspended, it's okay. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi here is 7 lines from the bottom. Man Tana Nagar HaNigar Asur D'Bayitarti. Who's this Tana who requires two things, tied and suspended? Rebbe Lezer, the Amar, who said likewise by the Pekak Hachaloin Tarti Be'inan. There are two conditions that need to be met. Michlal, apparently, the Rabbi Yehuda Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda says, well, only Kshira is required. He is following Rabbanan. Alma Rabbanan Kshira Bo. Apparently, Rabbanan require Kshira. So this is Rabbi Yirmiyah challenging Rabba. So Rabba responded, no, I have another Tana who I'm following. And I maintain that even that the Rabbanan don't even require Kshira. Says Rashi, Ki Tana, like the following Tana, I feel Kshira, like boy, even Kshira that he doesn't require. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the Amar, who says, Mesukan ba'azmana ba'alma, he said even if it's just prepared through a designation, that's sufficient to allow its use on Shabbos. Even if it's not tied. Where is this Tana? Let's see. Says the Gemara, Ki Tana, 7 lines from the bottom in the Gemara, the Sani is learned in the rice. A kana, this is a tube with some type of reed, some type of stick. So the Balabayis, the homeowner, prepared it, he designated it to be used as a bolt to open and close his door. So when it is tied and totally also suspended, it's not dragging on the floor, then he can open and close with it. He can use it. Ein kosher v'toli, but if it's not tied and suspended, ein pesach v'noil, but he cannot use it because when he inserts it into the ground, it appears like he's doing binyan. Therefore, it's aser. It would seem from Rashi that is even issa d'oraisa here, because he's actually building, he's adding something to the ground. This is the shita of the Tanakam. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, mesukan afu b'she'eni kosher. Shimon Gamliel is very makel. He's very lenient. He says, you don't even need to be tied. As long as it's mesukan, is designated, it's prepared for this purpose. It's mutter to be used because the Farshim explain has a din of a kli, a utensil. A utensil is not construction material. Therefore, it is mutter. One can go and return the kana back into its place, into the threshold, and you're fine to go because it's merely kli shimush and has nothing to do with binyan. So in summary, at this point in the Gemara we have 3 shitas regarding the pkaka chaloin, regarding the negeh hanigrar. So let's begin with the most stringent shita, which requires 2 things. It needs to be kosher and tali. It needs to be inherently connected, tied, and number 2, it needs to be clear and visible that this is something which is prepared for this use. It needs to be suspended midair. It can't be sitting on the floor. This is the shita of the Tanakama and the Mishnah of Negeh HaNigar, and likewise the shita of Lezer, now Mishnah by Pekak. Now, there's a shita of Rabbi Yehuda, who says, when the thing is merely tied, that's sufficient. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there's no concern of Baina Midairaisa. It's only a rabbinic concern, so as long as it's tied, that removes the concern of the Rabbanan. It doesn't even appear like binyan because it's something connected, eternally connected, it's built in, it's prepared for this use. It looks like a kli, and there's no concern, there's no appearance of construction going on here. This is the shita of Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah of Negeh HaNigar. And we have the third shita of Rav Shimon Gamliel we just mentioned, that this kana, which was merely prepared for this use, it's not hanging, it's not tied, it's okay, it could be used because it's a kli, it's a utensil prepared for this purpose, there's no construction going on, there's no concern, even the Rabbanan. Now, we have a difference of opinion regarding the shitas chachamim in our Mishnah of Kaka Chaloim. Who do they concur with? So, according to Rab Abba, he says the chachamim, they're compatible with the shita of Shimon Gamliel. Merely hazmana, merely hachana, merely tikkun, the fact that it's prepared for it, it's designated for it, that's sufficient. We don't even need it to be tied, certainly not hanging. Whereas according to Rabbi Yirmiyah, he interprets the shita of the chachamim in accordance with the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Certainly it doesn't need to be suspended, but kosher, tied, is a required precondition. Continues the Gemara, we're going to have a 4th shita. Amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Shilas, Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rav Yochanan. Halacha k'Rav Shimon Gamliel. That what? That merely designation, hachana, hazmana, that's sufficient to allow its use. Umi Amar Rabbi Yochanan hachi. Is that the case of Rabbi Yochanan? Paskind, he ruled like Rabbi Yochanan, like Rav Shimon Gamliel? V'atzanan, haven't we learned in the Mishnah? Kol kisuya kelim, this is the Mishnah coming up soon. All the kisuya kelim, lids of utensils, sheishlam beis achiza, who feature a handle. They have a beis achiza, and they tell them b'Shabbos, they can be moved on Shabbos, they're not considered muktzah. V'omar Rabbi Yehuda bar Shila, Omar Rav Asi, Omar Rabbi Yochanan. This is the same Rabbi Yochanan, right? He says, there's an additional requirement. One cannot be metaltal those lids. It can only do so provided sheyesh teres kli alein. If they have a teres kli, if they're classified as a kli, meaning they perform another function elsewhere in a different capacity, they can be used for something else. So merely using them as a lid for a kli, according to Rabbi Yochanan, apparently that's not sufficient to grant this lid a teres kli, a utensil status to allow its movement on Shabbos. It needs to also have a potential function in a different capacity. It has to have a teres kli aleim independent of the use as a lid. So only if it has a teres kli can it be used as a lid. So apparently, according to Rabbi Yochanan, one can only use something if it is regarded as a kli elsewhere. So how can he say that merely using this kana, merely a kana which was merely designated for the use is mutter? A kana is not a kli. Rabbi Yochanan clearly says that mental preparation is not sufficient. Mental designation does not allow its use, does not give it a teres kli like those lids, even though he's using them as a lid of a kli. That's not sufficient. One cannot make them into a kli simply by having in mind, preparing it for this use. It needs to have a teres kli. It needs to function as a kli elsewhere. It needs to have a proper function to give it a teres kli and allow its use. So this kana, why can he use it? This kana is not a kli. Now, if it's not a kli, then it's a catch-22. Not only is it muktzah, but now it's baina, because he's taking a non-kli entity and he's inserting it into the threshold. It's like construction material. It's not a kli. So it would be, perhaps, it seems like it's even a question of a malach on Shabbos, a malach of baina. So we seem to have that inconsistency. Here Rabbi Yochanan says mere designation of the kana is sufficient, and here Rabbi Yochanan says it has to have a teres kli. So that's not a chitem, perhaps you'll say Yochanami. Here as well, by the kana, the teres kli, all of it has a teres kli. It's classified as a utensil. Rashi says it can be used to overturn olives or to crack nuts, and therefore it is mutter to be used on Shabbos as a threshold bolt because it has a din kli. So everything works well. 1 second. Umi boy Reb Shimon Gamliel teres kli olav. Now Rabbi Yochanan works because Rabbi Yochanan requires that this thing should be regarded, classified as a utensil. But Rabbi Yochanan, he ruled like Reb Shimon Gamliel. He said that the halacha follows Reb Shimon Gamliel. Now Reb Shimon Gamliel himself does not require that it should have a teres kli. According to him, according to Reb Shimon, mere designation, preparation is sufficient. Mere mental designation is sufficient. So how could Rabbi Yochanan rule like Reb Shimon Gamliel, who doesn't even require teres kli? Umi boy Reb Shimon Gamliel teres kli. Does Reb Shimon Gamliel require that this item be classified as a utensil and have the ability to serve, to function in another capacity as a kli? V'atanya, haven't we learned in the brisa? This is the brisa we had yesterday. Chori shel dekel, these palm branches, gadron l'shem eitzim, which you harvested to be used as firewood. So they're muktzah machas gufay, they're inherently muktzah, they're not a kli. What happens? V'nimlach alein liyeshiva. He decided to use them, to sit on them. Tzarech lekasher. He needs to tie them together in a bundle. He needs to do a maisa to indicate, to demonstrate its new designation. And Farshim say when you tie it together, it makes it suitable for sitting on them. So you need to demonstrate, you need to indicate that this thing going forward is going to be used as a kli. No, he says you don't need ein tzarech lekasher. He doesn't need to tie. Mere mental designation, mental preparation is sufficient. So we see clearly that according to him, in order to allow its use and movement on Shabbos, you don't need to have a kli. Even these pieces of wood are considered to be mutter on Shabbos, since he intended on using them for Shabbos. So how could Rabbi Yochanan be compatible with Shimon Gamliel? Says the more you're right. Rabbi Yochanan is severely kavasei b'chada. Rabbi Yochanan he split things. In one aspect, he holds like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel that this kana, this threshold stick that he's using, doesn't need to be tied, doesn't need to be suspended. In that extent, in that aspect, he holds like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Upalagalei b'chad. But he disagrees with him regarding another aspect, another angle. Meaning, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you need to have a teres kli olav. You don't need to have it tied. It doesn't have to be inherently connected to the doy to allow its use. As long as it was prepared, even if it wasn't tied, it's okay. But it needs to have a teres kli. This kana, as Rashi says, needs to have a potential use elsewhere, to crack a nut, etc., has to be classified as a kli. Only then can one go ahead and use it and insert it into his threshold to lock his door. It's a kli. It's not construction material. Therefore, one can use it. But shiur is not required. It doesn't need to be visibly connected, built into the system. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says not only doesn't need to be tied, it could be some random kana. As long as he designated for this purpose, he had in mind, prepared it for this, even if it's not a kli. Mental preparation is enough, just as he says those pieces of wood which he decided to use for sitting, that's enough. He doesn't need to tie them. And Kashas Rabbi Yochanan, who needs a teres kli, he needs the kana to have potential use elsewhere. He needs those pieces of wood to be tied together so that they appear, they have a tzura of a kli. And likewise, when it comes to those lids of the kelim we mentioned earlier, the kisui ha-kelim, one can only use them if they provide a service elsewhere, if they can function in another capacity and they're classified as a utensil. Continues the Gemara Darash Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha taught a pischa de Reish Galusa at the entranceway of the Reish Galusa's home, Halach Rabbi Lezer, that the halacha follows Rabbi Lezer, the very stringent approach, requires two preconditions be met prior to plugging the pekaka chaloin into the chaloin. It needs to be tied and suspended. Mosif Rav Amram. So Rav Amram asked the kasha from a Mishnah later on in Masechas Shabbos. U'medivrayim lamadnu. So the Mishnah relates an incident where they plugged a window and they measured. And the Mishnah says, Medivrayim lamadnu, from their words, from their actions, we learned, Shapaikikin, one may plug a window on Shabbos, U'maydidin, one may measure, V'kaishrin, tie. We're going to see later on in the Masechta exactly what this is referring to. B'Shabbos, so one can do this on Shabbos. So apparently, one can plug a window, and we're speaking in a case where it wasn't tied, it wasn't suspended. So apparently, one can do so even when those conditions are not met. Amalei Abai. So Abai challenges Rav Amram. He says, my daitach, what's your thinking? Meaning, why are you asking from that Mishnah? Mishum de Ketani Stama. Meaning, why are you asking from that Mishnah? Perhaps that Mishnah is not following Rabbi Lezer, it's following Shittas Rabbanan, who don't require these conditions to be met. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha was paskening, was ruling like Rabbi Lezer. So what's the kasha from the Mishnah on Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha? It's two different opinions. So he said, my daitach, what are you thinking? Mishum de Ketani Stama. Because that Mishnah was stated in a stama form. Stama means anonymously. So the Mishnah, which Rabbi HaKadosh taught anonymously, it seems to have greater weight. It seems to imply that the halacha follows that opinion. So Abai says, 1 second, well, we have another Mishnah, which is also a stama, and presents the opposing view. Neger ha-nigra, nami stami. The Mishnah learned earlier, Neger ha-nigra, begins with two preconditions, tied and suspended. And that Mishnah is also stated anonymously. There's no name to that opinion. So that Mishnah, which is also a Stam Mishnah, presents Rabbi Lezer's opinion. So what are you asking from the other Mishnah, when we have another Mishnah here, which is also an anonymous Mishnah, and presents the halacha in a stringent manner, that Kshira and Tli are required? So why do you prefer that Mishnah over this Mishnah? So he responded, Rav Amram responded, a story. The fact that the Chacham over there in the Mishnah later on relied on this opinion, in actuality, and halacha l'maisa, that indicates that that opinion carries greater authority. You see that they relied on that shita to actually carry out in practice. So apparently that Mishnah carries more weight. It's a story in a story form, and indeed we're meant to follow that Mishnah and rule leniently, not like Rabbi Lezer, that Kshira and Tliya are not requirements. So in summary, we have 4 shittas regarding our sugya. The most stringent shitta is kasher v'tali. So the pekak, this window shutter, likewise the bolt used by the threshold to close the door, in order to allow the return of the shutter into the window, the returning of the bolt into the threshold, 2 conditions need to be met. It needs to be tied and suspended. The next shita is tying is sufficient. The next shita is hazmana, preparation, mental preparation is sufficient. And finally we had Rabbi Yochanan, who was basically following the shita of Rav Shimon Gamliel, that hazmana is sufficient. It doesn't need to be physically tied and strung up on the ceiling, on the window, on the door, because once it's a utensil, it's a kli, there's no concern at all, because a utensil is not building material. There's no binyan taking place. However, Rabbi Yochanan has an additional condition. He requires that there be a Torah's kli olav. that this item, this object, be regarded, be classified as a utensil elsewhere, meaning it has the capacity, ability to serve elsewhere in some sort of capacity, and therefore it is regarded as a kli, that will allow, for instance, this kana to be inserted in the threshold without any concerns. Continues the Mishnah. Kol kisuya kelim. So all the kisui, the lids of kelim, of utensils, she'esh lam beis achiza, who have a handle, the tolam b'Shabbos, they can be moved on Shabbos. They're not mukt. Omer Rabbi Yosi, ba'amed v'mamurim bekisui kakois. This is only a discussion. This limitation, this requirement to have a handle is only by an in-ground cover. Something which is covering the karka, for instance, a pit, a bar, a manhole cover. So these are kisui kakois, and these require a handle to allow their use on Shabbos, because otherwise it's not regarded as a kli. It's meant to remain on the ground, it's part of the karka, you do binyan with it, it's not a kli. But if it has a handle, that indicates, that demonstrates that it's mobile, it's meant to be moved around, it's portable, and therefore has the din of a kli. This is strictly when it comes to kisur karkois, ground coverings. Aval bekisur kelim, but ordinary pots, only lids of utensils, benkach or benkach tolam b'Shabbos, whether or not they have a beis achiza, a handle, they can be moved on Shabbos. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rav Shila, Amar Rav Asim, Rav Yochanan. And this is what we mentioned earlier. He presents another restriction. Vuhu, when are these lids, even lids of ordinary utensils, when can they be moved on Shabbos? Vuhu, provided sheyesh teres kli alein, that they have a teres kli granted to them. They are classified as utensil. They have potential use elsewhere in another capacity. One can use them in some sort of function other, in addition to being used as a lid. Merely the lid use does not regard it as a utensil status. Continues the Gemara. As Rashi explains, now we have something difficult here, because if Rabbi Yochanan determines that the only time you can be metaltal a kisui is if it has a teres kli, so why does the Mishnah discuss a beis achiza, that it appears in the Mishnah that even a ordinary utensil lid, a kisui of a kli, requires a handle to allow its use on Shabbos? Now, if we're speaking about a lid which is regarded as a kli elsewhere, it has a teres kli, it's classified as a kli, so why is a handle required? It's not muktzah, it's a kli. So that prompts the Gemara to go ahead and interpret the Mishnah. You must delve into the Mishnah's real meaning. Explains the Gemara. The Kuliyama all agree, meaning getting back to the Mishnah, where the Tanna Kama says that a beis achiza is a requirement, or basically says it's only a requirement by in-ground covers. The Kuliyama all agree. Kisui karkois. When we're speaking about a kisui of karka, for instance, the lid of a bar, of a pit, im yesh lam beis achiza in, if they have a handle, then they can be moved on Shabbos. That indicates that it's portable, it's mobile, it's considered like a kli. Eloi, but if it does not have a handle, then it can't be moved on Shabbos. It's not regarded as a utensil because it belongs on a bar in the ground. It's part of a building, it's part of the ground. It's not a kli. So all agree to that. There's no discussion between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yosi regarding kisui karkois. On the other hand, in contrast, kisui hakelim, what about a lid of a kli? Afagav de'en la beis achiza. Even if they don't have a handle, they can be used on Shabbos, they can be moved on Shabbos. Once again, as Rabbi Yochanan tells us, these lids are regarded as kelim, they have use elsewhere, they're classified as a kli. So even if they don't have a handle, what do you need a handle for? It's a kli. And right now it's being used as a kisi of a kli. It's not being attached to the ground. There's no reason to require a beis achiza to indicate its mobility. So there's no discussion about that. So again, all agree that kisi karka need a beis achiza. All agree that a kisi kli does not need a beis achiza to render it non-muktzah. Ki pligi. When is there a dispute between Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yosi? Bekelim dechabrunu ba'ara. Something in between classification. Kelim that are attached to the ground. For instance, a oven, as we learned yesterday, the tanner is something which is typically fastened into the ground. So that's an in-between stage. It's not a portable kli. nor is it a pit in the ground. It's a kli which functions with the karka. Now we have a point of contention between Tanna Kama, who says, well, even this requires a beis achiza because it's so similar to those in-ground covers. One might confuse the two things. So unless it has a handle, one shouldn't move it on Shabbos. Whereas Rabbi Yossi says no. As long as it's not an in-ground covering, it's not a boyer or those type of things, then you don't need a handle. It's a kli that you're covering. And it's obviously different than a boyer. Let's see inside. Ki pligi, when do they disagree? Bekalim de chabrinu ba'ar. Regarding kalim which he attached to the ground. Ma asava gazrina. Tanna Kama requires a beis achiza here as well, because we have geyser. We're concerned, perhaps he'll confuse the two. If we allow this, he's going to allow even the lid of an in-ground cover. Umar savalai gazrina basically say there's no gzeira. As long as it's a lid of a kli, it's fine, even without a beis achiza. Lishnachina, there's another version. As the Farshim say, there's really no substantive difference between the two Lashonis. It's merely linguistics. Ki pligi, when do they disagree? Bekisi taner, regarding the lid of a oven, which is a kli, but it's attached to the ground. Mar medam lid kisi karka. Tanna Kama compares it to ground coverings and requires a handle. Or mar medam lid kisi kalim. Rabbi Yossi compares it to ordinary lid coverings of a utensil, and does not require a beis achiza. So in summary, we learned about a kisoy, a lid. Rabbi Yechon tells us the first precondition here is that the lid has to have a turas kli, has to have the potential to serve in a different capacity to be classified as a kli. So once we have that introduction, let's proceed. So a lid of a utensil, all agree, a handle is not required because it's being used to cover a kli which is mobile, which is portable. It's pretty obvious and evident that it's a kli. The lid as well. Regarding on the other extreme, we have the kisei of karkois. All agree it needs a beis achiza because it's serving the ground. It's not meant to be moved around. It's not portable. It's not mobile. It's meant to sit on the ground. There's binyan being performed with it. So only if it has a beis achiza, which indicates its mobility, can one move it on Shabbos. Regarding that in-between stage of a kli mechuber l'karka, like a tana, we have machlokes. Tanna Kama compares that to the kisei karkois, because they're very similar in nature, therefore a beis achiza is required to allow its use. Rabbi Yossi says the lid of a tanner can be used even if it does not have a beis achiza, because a tanner, at the end of the day, is a kli. Hadran loch kol hakelim. Continues the Mishnah, going to discuss the concept of tircha, exertion on Shabbos. The Chachamim do not allow exertion on Shabbos. One's meant to conduct himself differently on Shabbos, more leisurely on Shabbos. Now, the Mishnah is going to tell us, in the event where one is confronted with a mitzvah, the Chacham allow tircha under certain circumstances. Let's see the Mishnah mefanin afilu arba v'chamesh kupos. One can clear out even 4 or 5 kupos, these baskets. Rashi says the kupos were known to have a standard size. He brings that the shiur of 3 sa'ah per basket. So one may clear out even 4 or 5 of these baskets full of shalteven, full of processed hay. Rashi elsewhere says that teven means that crushed straw. So these things are not muktzah, they're edible, they're for animal feed. So you can clear them out. V'shal tvua, or baskets full of grain. Pnei urchim, on account of guests, which some say we're speaking about wayfarers who need a place to stay, so it's a mitzvah. Or pnei bitul beis hamedrash, on account of disturbing the beis hamedrash. You want to avoid disruption, meaning if you need to make room for the people that are learning here, so one may clear out the baskets. But he cannot clear out the oitza, the storeroom. The Gemara will explain exactly what this means. Now, certainly, he can only move things that are not muktzah. Says the Mishnah, mefan and truma Torah. He can go ahead and clear out truma, which is Torah, which is suitable for the kohen. Udmai, likewise, produce bought from Ha'aretz. Dmai means damai. One's certain as to its status. We don't know whether or not he removed the trumas and maestros. Nevertheless, it's not muktzah. The Gemara will explain all these different situations. So these things are a list of non-muktzah items. Dmai, Ma'aser Rishon Shenatu Masai. This is the Ma'aser Rishon given to the Levi, who needs to separate something for the kohen. So the truma was already, nita was already separated and given for the kohen. Ma'aser Sheni v'Hegdish Niftu, Ma'aser Sheni or Hegdish, which were already Niftu, Pidyon took place, the Kedusha was already transferred, and allows the Ma'aser Sheni and Hegdish to be consumed by an ordinary individual outside Yerushalayim. V'Tumas Hayavesh, Turmeric is some type of bean. So even a dry turmeric may be moved on Shabbos. It's not muktzah because it's still suitable for who? For goats. But he could not go ahead and move muktzah items which are not suitable, which are useless. Like tevel, produce which were not separated from, which is asur b'achila, but it's maserishan. Nor the maserishan whose truma was not separated yet. These things were not yet nifta. The kedusha was not yet transferred. This is a type of kidneys, type of bean. Rashi says, which is not suitable even for the animal when it's raw. Nor can he move mustard, which is not really edible until it's ground up. Grinding on Shabbos is a malacha. So in its current state, it's muktzah. He says one can move luf. Why? Because it's fed to ravens, which is something wealthy people have in their homes. So although your typical person doesn't have an oirev, but Rishim Gamliel, let's remember whole that Kol Yisrael Bnei Malachim, as stated earlier in the Masechta, all Yisrael are regarded as Bnei Malachim, sons of royalty, princes, and they're classified in the same class as wealthy people, meaning something which is suitable for a wealthy person. It's considered to be suitable to any yid. We don't differentiate between various groups of Yisrael. Therefore, if it's mutter for the usher, suitable for him, it's suitable for everybody. Chavile kash, the mission includes with bundles of straw, v'chavile eitzim, bundles of wood, v'chavile zrod, and bundles of these soft branches, these reeds, which are edible. So if he designated them for animal feed, so he prepared them, mentally prepared them for animal feed, metalton oisam, one can move them, because coming into Shabbos, they weren't muktzah. Vim la, but otherwise, metalton oisam, because they're not prepared. So all these things, the chavili eitzim, chavili kash, chavili zrodim, are animal feed, and it depends if it was muchan for that or not. Continues the Gemara. We began, one can be mefana, afilo arba, v'chamesh kupos, and the Mishnah says, avaloy yisa'itzer. How do we understand these words on the Mishnah? We have two approaches. We have Rav Chizda, we have Shmuel. Says the Gemara, Hash the chamish mefanan arba meboya. How do we understand the words? The Mishnah says you can clear out even 4 or 5. Now, if you can clear 5, then certainly 4. Why does the Mishnah need to specify 4 and 5? Hash the chamish mefanan. If you can go ahead and clear 5, arba meboya, is it necessary to state that 4 is allowed? Amar Rav Chizda. This is what the Mishnah means. Arba michamish. If all he has there is a total of 5 baskets, so you can go ahead and clear out 4 of those 5 baskets. But he cannot clear out the entire area. Why? Rashi explains, because if he does that, if he clears out the entire area, now he has a clear floor, he may be tempted to smooth out that floor. Ashvuye guma is clear out those pits, which is a malacha of baina. So you may not clear out his entire storehouse completely. So if he has 5, stop at 4. Arba mechamish. The Mishnah continues. V'chamesh, when the Mishnah says he can clear out 5, that's speaking of Me'itzer Gadol. He has a large storeroom, he has more than 5. So you can go ahead and clear out 5 because he's not clearing out his entire area. But he must stop at number 5. More than that is not allowed because it's an excessive exertion of Tirchi Yisir. The Mishnah continues. Avaloya sa'itzer. What does that mean? Umay avaloya sa'itzer. Shalo yascha ba'itzer tchila. He cannot initiate. He can't begin using his storeroom the first time this Shabbos if he had not yet begun using the content of his storeroom before Shabbos. Why? Umani, who is this? Rabbi Yehuda. This is following the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, the Islam Muktzah, who subscribes to Muktzah, meaning he applies the concept, he has a broad application to the concept of Muktzah. Rabbi Yehuda requires that something be designated for Shabbos use, it needs to be muchan, prepared for Shabbos. It needs to be something positive. A positive element needs to be present to allow use on Shabbos. Therefore, if this oitzer was not used this Shabbos, was not used at all, and he's initiating the use during the Shabbos, it's not prepared for use. For his own or animal use, it wasn't prepared, it wasn't designated for it. It's not muchan from before Shabbos, therefore it's considered muktzah. So according to Rav Chizda, once again, the Mishnah says he can carry out 4 baskets of a total of 5. 5 baskets when there is more, but he cannot clear out the entire storehouse. Likewise, he can't begin he can't begin using the contents of his storeroom on Shabbos because it's muktzah. Ushmol Amar, as follows. Arba v'chamesh k'da'amrin. When the Mishnah says 4 or 5, it's just using common language. Clear out 4, if you need, clear out even 5. V'boy, if he needs, afilu tu v'nami mefanan, he can clear as much as he needs. So according to Shmuel, there's no restriction of 5. Umay avaloyas ha'otzar? What does the Mishnah mean? That he cannot clear out the otzar? Shalo yigmar kulai. He shouldn't complete the entire storehouse, meaning he shouldn't clear out completely. Til ma'asil shvei gumois. Because perhaps he'll be tempted to come and straighten out those pits. So he shouldn't clear out the entire floor. He can clear and clear, but not the entire storeroom. Aval aschuli masal. But certainly he can initiate using the contents of his storeroom on Shabbos. There's no concern of muktzah. Mani, who is this? Reb Shimoni, the Leslie muktzah, who does not subscribe to this broad application of muktzah. According to Reb Shimon, you don't need a positive element. You don't need a designation to allow use on Shabbos. You don't need hachana. As long as it wasn't negated from Shabbos use, it wasn't pushed away from Shabbos, it wasn't nidcha from Shabbos, but something which is customarily used, human food, animal food, it's okay, you can use it. It's suitable. It functions, it has a purpose. It's not negated from Shabbos use. It's not a stone or pebble which is inherently useless. So although it wasn't prepared before Shabbos, so what? It doesn't need achana. And therefore, according to Reb Shimon, one can begin using the otzar even on Shabbos. So in summary, we learned about clearing out baskets for the sake of a mitzvah. We have 2 approaches. Rav Chizah says he cannot initiate on Shabbos. Rav Chizah says he can't complete clearing out the entire storehouse on Shabbos because of a concern of malacha. More than 5 he cannot do. Shmuel says he can initiate because there's no concern of muktzah. He can't complete the entire storehouse because he might smooth out the floor. And according to Shmuel, there's no restriction of 5 baskets. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We began with a discussion of a pkach hachaloin, a window shutter. We continued with a discussion of a neger hanigra, this bolt, which is being used for the closing of a door. And we concluded with 4 shittas. What is required to go ahead and allow this shutter to be put back into the window, the bolt into the door, onto the threshold? We're trying to address the concern of boina, whether min HaTorah, whether min Rabbanon. 4 shittas we have. We have the first shitta, which is very machmer, requires them to be tied to the building. Also, tali needs to be suspended where it's visible that it stands to be used for this purpose. We have that Sarah Belezer. That's the Tanakama in the Mishnah of Nega HaNigra. We have a Shittas Rabbi Yehuda who says, even by the bolt, there's no concern of a malacha d'oraisa. It's a kli. You're not building anything. You're not introducing any construction material here. There's only a rabbinic concern. Therefore, as long as it's tied, that addresses that concern, and it's mutter to be used. Rav Shimon Gamliel says, a mere designation is sufficient. Hazmana, as long as he prepared for this purpose, it's considered to be a kli. There's no concern of binyan. What kind of binyan is there? It's a utensil. It goes in and out of the window, goes in and out of the door. Therefore, you don't need to be tied, and certainly not suspended. Regarding the Shittas Chachamim in our Mishnah who say, Benkach or Benkach, Pakikim boy. In either case, it can be used. Who are they following? Which Shita are they compatible with? So we have one approach, which was Yirmiyah, who's more stringent. He says that the Chachamim require Kshira. It needs to at least be built in to the building to remove any binyan concerns. Whereas Rabbi Abba says, no, Chacham don't even require that. As long as it's a kli, as it stands to be used for this purpose, it's designated for this purpose, it's a kli, it's a utensil. There's no concern whatsoever. Finally, we had Rabbi Yochanan, who basically follows Rishon Gamliel, that mere preparation, designation is sufficient. But he says, fine, we don't need to be tied to suspended, but it has to have a teres kli. It has to be regarded, it has to be classified as a kli due to its function elsewhere. So it needs to function in some sort of other capacity, which grants it a teres kli and will allow it to be used on Shabbos, inserted into the threshold as well. We proceeded with the halacha of a kisui, a lid, and Rabbi Yochanan told us it is only not muktzah provided that this kisui has a teres kli, is regarded as a utensil elsewhere. And the Gemara told us that when it comes to a kisi of kalim, certainly a handle is not required because it's obvious that it's a kli. It's a lid of a kli. It's not part of the ground. You don't have a handle to indicate its mobility. Regarding a kisi of karkois, those in-ground coverings over there, we need a beis achiza, a handle to indicate its mobility, to indicate that it's a kli. And regarding a kli that's mechubel karka, we're machlokes. For instance, a lid of a tanner, according to Tanakama, we need a beis achiza because this is a kli which is connected to the ground. It looks like a mechubel karka. It can be confused with the kisi of the karka, which the basis is no, it's a kisi of a kli, and beis achiza is not required. The Mishnah tells us when we clear out a storeroom for the sake of a mitzvah, we have Chiz's approach. You cannot initiate the storeroom because it's muktzah, wasn't prepared for Shabbos. You cannot clear out the entire area because he might go ahead and clear and smooth out the floor. More than 5 is not allowed on account of tircha. According to Shmuel, he cannot clear out the entire area, but he certainly can do more than 5 baskets.